Hey, welcome to our YouTube channel. I'm Pastor Nathan Metz here at Community Church in Newark, Ohio. We're just 30 minutes east of Columbus. And I'm telling you where we're located because there's way more to church than just sermons on YouTube. We hope that if you are in the area, you would come and join us in person if you're able to. Even if you're not in the area, there's a local church near you, and YouTube channel sermons are really only supplements to our involvement in a local congregation. This that you're getting ready to watch, this sermon, is just cut from our entire worship time together. I do hope, though, that it provides some challenging or encouraging content, and that God would be able to speak to you in the middle of your week.
We're moving into a series called Nativity, and in order for me to just open the series, I want to talk a little bit about that word because it's one of those words. Do you remember when I told you about eulogy, that eulogy just means to say an encouraging word, but we only use it in one setting, and so now that's what it means? Nativity is one of those words. It means the occasion of a birth. And we just use it so frequently for the occasion of Jesus' birth that we don't typically use it in other places, but you can. You can even use it for an idea or a concept or a company. Something that happens. When did that begin? What was the setting of the beginning of that? That would be described as the nativity. And that word, some of its cousins or siblings are cognate, the beginning of an idea, the beginning of a conception in your mind. Innate, something that comes from within. Native, the place where you're from. And Renaissance, the start and birth of something great. You see how these are all related. They all come from the same Latin root, which I don't know and won't pretend to know. All of them point to the occasion of a birth, and usually we mean the life of Jesus, just to give us another biblical orientation for what I mean by nativity and what this series is intended to do. I'm going to read Galatians 4. Galatians is another letter of Paul, and he, in this sentence, is getting ready to express confusion about the growth of the church. And I'm not, in reading this, saying that I'm confused about your growth, but there's something specific that he says which is an indicator of growth to come. How does he want to see the church grow and develop? He uses this phrase. It's in chapter 4, verse 19. My children, for whom I am again in the pains of childbirth until Christ is formed in you. He believes that if Christ is formed in them, like a baby in a womb, then that will bring about new life. It'll bring about the thing that he sees as missing. That word formed is only used there. That word formed. Now, you know that the Bible was not written in English. So sometimes the Greek or the Hebrew or the Aramaic words that we have access to don't translate into the same kind of words that we have. So you may have like 3 or 4 words for formed that for English it's all formed, but it means something specific to them. To them, that word formed meant, and I'm quoting, literally, until a mind and life in complete harmony with the mind and life of Christ shall have been formed in you. What is Paul saying? My dear children, for whom I am again in the pains of childbirth until Christ is literally your mind and life in complete harmony with his mind and life. That's what he's talking about. And so normally when we talk about nativity, we're saying Christ is born in Bethlehem. In this series, I'm saying let him be born again in us. His nativity is our nativity, an occasion of our birth. What we're going to do is as we put the manger down here in front of us, throughout this series, we're going to stand in different places in the story. Sometimes it'll be in Luke, which is one of the best stories, the best narratives of the birth of Christ, his nativity. So we'll stand in one of the places that Luke gives to us, and we'll look and say, what does your nativity tell me about my nativity? Are you with me? And then we're going to go over here, and eventually we're going to go to Isaiah, the prophecy, for unto us a child is born. What does that tell me from the prophecy of your nativity about my nativity? And we're just going to move around it for the month of December and see, what does the birth of Christ tell me about the birth of Christ within me? So let's begin. We're going to go to Luke. We're starting in chapter 1. And as you're moving there, the book of Luke was likely, if not certainly, the third gospel to be written. We believe, I don't know if I've told you this before, a Markan priority. That means that likely the first gospel to be written was the book of Mark. Mark sat down with Peter, and Mark wrote his gospel to the impoverished, persecuted Gentiles. And that's why Mark opens with just, Jesus is the Son of God. That's exciting. He needs to tell them right away. And then Matthew took Mark's gospel and added his stuff to it, but he was writing to the Jews. And that's why you see such a Jewish bent. That's why Matthew opens with a genealogy. That's what the Jews want to know. How do we link Jesus to where we came from? And then Luke took all of his observations of Jesus personally, everything that he knew, and the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, and Matthew and Mark, and he wrote his version. And he describes it as an orderly account. He even begins by saying, many have undertaken to draw up an account of things that have been fulfilled among us. And he's right, many. We have 4. Some say there could have been hundreds. We have these 4. So beginning with Mark, how does he choose to open his gospel? One time, I was getting ready to preach, and this is in Uganda, and Uganda has some very formal things that they do. And I knew that I was going to preach at this church, but I wasn't there ahead of time to discuss how the service would be set. And so I sat in my seat waiting for my turn to preach. And first, a man came up and said, welcome to church, and he said a few things. And then he introduced the next person. And the next person came up, and he spoke for a little while highly, introducing the next person. And then that person came up, and they kept becoming more official in the way they held themselves. And finally, he came up, and he began describing a new person, which I could tell was me. And I realized when I stood up to preach, I had been introduced 3 times. And it made me feel really special. Have you ever been introduced? Isn't that fun? That's one of the favorite things about prom, is you get to stand in the promenade and you get to be introduced. Your name is called out. That's why Luke starts this way. He can't wait to talk about Jesus. But he wants to lift him up so high that he starts with an introduction. He introduces the introducer. Today we're going to talk about the introducer. The man who's going to stand and say, there is someone coming after me, and I'm not even worthy to tie his shoes. We want to know who that person is first. It's a build-up. Luke chapter 1, verses 5 through 7. Let's begin there. In the time of Herod, the king of Judah, there was a priest named Zechariah, who belonged to the priestly division of Abijah. His wife Elizabeth was also a descendant of Aaron. Both of them were righteous in the sight of God, observing all the Lord's commands and decrees blamelessly, but they were childless because Elizabeth was not able to conceive. They were both very old. Now, what can we learn from this? Who was Zechariah and Elizabeth? Today we're going to go not quite verse by verse, but concept by concept. Sometimes it'll be one verse, sometimes it'll be multiple statements. But it's going to be a Bible study, and we're going to end in verse 25, just so that you know. So we know that Elizabeth and Zechariah come from a priestly line, and they serve as priests. Zechariah is the priest. Elizabeth comes from the line of Aaron, a priestly family. A priest is a mediator. If you have two sides and there's any disagreement or space between them, you need a mediator. Mediator is someone who fills in the gap. That's the role of the priest. Jesus is described as our great mediator, capital M for him, because it's his title. He is a mediator. He's holding the hands of both parties. I want you to be able to talk to you. And whatever is the gap between you, as the mediator, I'll help to navigate that for you so that you can be together. That's what priesthood is. You are a priesthood. 1 Peter chapter 2, you are described as a royal priesthood. Next week's sermon is on Mary, and one of the things I'm going to say is that when we protested against the Catholic Church, we over-protested. We threw out too much. And there's a whole lot we need to take back because they weren't that wrong. And this is one of the things that we just don't do, and we've got to take it back. That's priesthood. Now, we don't do it in the same way that they did. We believe that 1 Peter chapter 2 tells us that we are a royal priesthood. And that means that you have a mediating role. The person who you are talking to and God. You have a responsibility to hold both of their hands and help them to talk to one another. And other people at different times in your life might mediate for you. That's what the priest was. The priest that Zechariah was fulfilling that role, he was mediating for the people. Now there's a funny contrast that we're seeing here. Verse 6 and verse 7, we don't like this. We don't like this. We want for people who do the right things to get good things. And verse 6 tells us that they do all the right things. It describes them as righteous in the sight of God and observing all the Lord's commands and decrees blamelessly. Good things come to good people, right? Not according to verse 7. They were childless because Elizabeth was not able to conceive, and they were both very old. There is a staleness to the eye that you might see in them. Not necessarily that they have done anything wrong, but there's going to be some confusion. Contextually, the people who were around them would quietly whisper and assume they're doing something, or else they'd have children. That's what they'd think of Elizabeth and Zechariah. Good people, good people, good people. I wonder why they don't have any children. Why are they barren? And they carry this around. Faithfulness and something negative. What have we done to deserve this? Everything right and everything wrong. They are faithful people. Faithful, faithful, faithful for generations. But as we're going to see, faithfulness can become predictable. And predictable can become stagnant. Faithfulness can become predictable, and predictable can become stagnant. Let's see how this plays out, beginning at verse 8 now. Once, when Zechariah's division was on duty and he was serving as priest before God, he was chosen by lot, according to the custom of the priesthood, to go into the temple of the Lord and burn incense. And when the time for the burning of the incense came, all the assembled worshipers were praying outside. Then the angel of the Lord appeared to him, standing at the right side of the altar of incense. How does God speak? You see, he's been faithful, not just he, but his family line has been faithful. She's been faithful. Priest married to priest from the line of Aaron. You know how far you have to go back to get to Aaron? You talk about faithfulness. This is faithfulness after faithfulness after faithfulness. How does God speak to them? He interrupts them. He interrupts the faithful process. How does God speak to you? Are you waiting him to speak to you at the prescribed time in the prescribed way, or is he allowed to interrupt? It says here, once, when Zechariah's division was on duty, once is the beginning of a story that's been happening for a long time. I think we can say that about each of us. Some of them we like and some of them we don't. We can tell your once story. Once when I was, for me, not so much anymore, but I used to play basketball as often as I could. And I had a way that I would go about doing it. And it's changed a little over the years because my muscles don't act like they used to. But you might say, once when I was, I'll tell you a better one, sermon preparation. I have a way that I write sermons. And you could write this about that. Once when Nathan was sitting down to prepare his sermon, that's the kind of story we're getting. Once when something was happening the way it's always happened, something different happened. God used human faithfulness. He waited for the tradition to bring Zechariah to him. Is your faithfulness, in your faithfulness, are you still looking? Hear me now. In your faithfulness, you came this morning, didn't you? In your faithfulness, you made sure to log on at the right time. In your faithfulness, are you still looking for the angel of the Lord? He wants to use your faithfulness. But faithfulness can become predictable, and predictable can become stagnant. Can your faithfulness be interrupted? If so, it will be. Often. If your faithfulness can be interrupted, then it will be, and it will be often. Not to remove it from being faithful, but to utilize it. Your faithfulness will become something. It will happen. It will occur. It will have a nativity. Now, verse 12. I'm going to begin back at verse 11 just so you get a little orientation here. Then an angel of the Lord appeared to him, standing at the right side of the altar of incense. Verse 12. When Zechariah saw him, he was startled and gripped with fear. What do angels look like? Well, it depends on what store you're shopping in, I guess. I've seen some that look like babies with wings. I've seen some that look like cartoon characters. I've seen a lot of different images of angels. But time and time again, when someone in the Bible is encountered by an angel, they are scared for their life. It's not that they are afraid that this thing is against them, although sometimes they are. It's that something that they are witnessing, even though it's for them, is so powerful that it still scares them. We played every Thanksgiving in Uganda, we would play flag football. All the Americans or close to Americans, that would be basically anybody who's civilized by the English. Australians would come. We had some Canadians there. New Zealand would come. And some of them we'd have to teach them the difference between American football and rugby. That was very important. But I love to play. I'm tall. I'm not that fast anymore, but I can catch pretty well from basketball skills. And so I like to play receiver. And so I'd go out there and just run and try to catch the ball. And we started getting these military guys showing up who were overseas. Yeah, you're laughing now. I know why you're laughing. Guys like me don't want guys like that running around on the field. And they would come out there. If we had one guy that showed up and we're picking teams and I'm down here stretching, and I look up and realize that this mammoth of a scary man is on my team. He's on my team. And I was scared to death that I might accidentally run into him. Sometimes even something that's on your side is so powerful, it's still scary. Christmas is sweet, but it's powerful. And if it loses its power so that we can keep it sweet, it loses what it does. Zechariah did not see the beginning of Christmas. That's what he's seeing. The angel came before him, and this is the moment when Christmas is going to begin, what we know of it. His first glance of it scares him. Now, I'm not saying we should do things in our Christmas here that would scare us. But I'm saying that there needs to be some recognition that all of this is pointing us to something that's not only sweet, it's scary, powerful. Powerful, powerful. And the people who saw it firsthand trembled. Verse 13, but the angel said to him, do not be afraid. This is commonly how the angels respond to the trembling people, by the way. Don't be afraid. Your prayer has been heard. Your wife Elizabeth will bear you a son, and you are to call him John. What prayer? Seriously, look back through. What prayer? We don't see he prayed. We assume he was praying, but it doesn't even say that he was praying, let alone what the prayer was. Now, I want to be careful not to add to Scripture. Don't say what it doesn't say, but also don't say what it doesn't say. It doesn't say that he prayed. It doesn't give us his prayer. So we have some options. Number one, he prayed out loud, but we just didn't write it down. Number two, it's an old prayer. He prayed that a long time ago, but now he's very old and he's not praying like that anymore. I'm pausing to let that sink in. It's an old prayer. And he prayed that hard, but he hasn't prayed it in a long time. Number three, it's a private prayer. It was something that it's not necessarily old, but he's held on to it, but he's ashamed to really say it out loud, and so he prays it in his heart because it's silly now. What I do know is that we don't know what he prayed, but apparently the angel talked to him about it. What are you praying? What are you praying that you probably wouldn't be that comfortable if anybody knew you were praying that way? What did you used to pray? That's the one I want to sit on for just a moment. What did you used to pray for? Could be old, could be private, could be unspoken. The answer to the question is God utilizes our old, even our private desires. That stuff that's down inside of you, and you wouldn't stand up here and pray about it, either because of the content or because of what's happened in your life since then. The stuff that you used to pray about, but it's just been too long, and you've just given up praying about it now, but it doesn't mean you don't want it. So what if that's what the angel's talking to him about? Think of it that way. Do not be afraid, Zechariah. Your prayer has been heard. What prayer? Your wife, Elizabeth, will bear you a son. That's the prayer. The impossible. I think we would forgive Zechariah for stopping that prayer, wouldn't we? As an old man, now at this stage in life, that takes an awful lot. Putting an awful lot on the line to pray for something like that. And the angel tells him to name him Grace. That's what John means. Gift of grace. Verse 14. I'm going to read up through 17 now. He will be a joy and a delight to you, and many will rejoice because of his birth. For he will be great in the sight of the Lord. He's never to take wine or other fermented drink, and he'll be filled with the Holy Spirit even before he is born. Can I read that again? He will be filled with the Holy Spirit even before he is born. He will bring back many of the people of Israel to the Lord their God, and he will go on before the Lord in the spirit and power of Elijah to turn the hearts of the parents to their children, and the disobedient to the wisdom of the righteous, to make ready a people prepared for the Lord. Zechariah, your old private prayer has been heard, and you're going to give birth to an announcer. God had a plan for Zechariah's child, and did he not choose exactly the right man for the job? Exactly the right family. They know everything that the angel is talking about. It's what they've been living. All of these bringing people back, raised in the spirit and the power of Elijah. He knows all about this man. Gives him the Nazirite vow. He knows all about that vow. He's picked the right person. And when God picks you to raise a child, he has picked the right person. You are the right person to raise your child. God has plans for your children. God has desires for them. Not just that they would be good kids and you'd be good parents. Specific for Susie and Sam and Elliot and John. Specific for your children. God has hopes and desires for them. I know you might be watching right now from home and your kids are being loud and you're trying to get them to be quiet. He's got plans for them. God is playing with them. He loves them. You might have been locked in your house since March, wondering when you're going to be able to link back in arms with other mothers and other fathers and other parents. God picked you for your kids. You're doing a good job. This is more than a be good kind of parenting. It's more than a do your homework kind of a parenting. Godly parenting is about character, divine direction, and innate created purpose. Discover who your children are intended to be. Allow for the Father to be your Father too. I just want to make a note about that word Father. God is not masculine. Humans are masculine. We use the word Father, but he's also a mother. Mothers allow him to teach you how to mother. Fathers allow him to teach you how to father. Verse 18. Zechariah asked the angel. Now this is a key moment. You have been living a faithful life, and faithfulness can become predictable, and predictable can become stagnant, but that stagnancy has been interrupted, and he's heard it. He was scared, but now he listened. This is the key moment. How will he respond? How can I be sure of this? And sure enough, our suspicions are true. I'm an old man, and my wife is well along in years. We knew it. He had disqualified himself from the interruption. He's got old private prayers that it's okay if somebody were to come along and talk to me about them, but I need to know how to be sure. Of course he does. Sometimes we rake these folks over the coals. We're going to have to say sorry when we meet him in heaven. He's a normal person. You would too. We all would. If you have reached a place in your life and you've gone past and you keep it kind of buried in your heart, it's something you still want, but I can't pray out loud about it anymore, and an angel were to come and interrupt you, we're going to say the same thing. What he's saying is, this seems too good to be true. Just tell me again. There's got to be something in our faith that says, I'm not sure how. There's got to be something in our faith that says, I'm not sure how. Press on. We were driving as a family, returning from a really fun time together. And we got near our house. There was a truck in front of us. I'm not even going to tell you what was written on the truck. It was so hateful. And our whole family saw it, and there was a gasp in the van. And my faith in that moment did not have what I just said our faith should have. I saw hate on the truck, and I began to figure it out. What's happened to this man driving the truck that would make him put something like that on the truck? Should I get in front of him and pull him over? Should I follow him, wait for him to go into the store and rip that garbage off the back of his window while he's in the store? These are the things that were running through my mind. Faith that says, I don't know how. Press on. That's what my wife and one of my daughters carried into that situation. Every night, for weeks now. Lord, thank you for this day. Thank you for everything that you've given us today. Please give us a good night's sleep. And please be with that man in that truck. Help give him better words. Put people in his life to encourage him. Bring him to you. I love that. That's the kind of faith that's allowed to be interrupted with something different than predictable. That says, I don't know how. We likely will never see that man. We'll have no idea the process that may go through his life, the outcome. But does faith need that, or does faith just give? I know that my wife and my daughter are just giving, and they don't need to calculate at the end and see if it was worth it. There's got to be something in our faith that says, Lord, you know something I don't. Anybody have that kind of faith right now? He must know something I don't. Yes. Verse 19. The angel said to him, I am Gabriel. By the way, Gabriel's the same angel that talked to Daniel, and Daniel also had his mouth shut. Might forget that part. It's later in the book. I stand in the presence of God, and I have been sent to speak to you and tell you this good news. And now you will be silent and not able to speak until the day this happens, because you did not believe my words, which will come true at their appointed time. Just to put a little period on the end of that. You didn't believe my words, which will come true at the appointed time. The angel doesn't doubt himself, does he? His authority, God's authority, doesn't depend on our belief. The authority of God does not depend on our belief. And the answer to Zechariah's doubt is, what does Gabriel say? What is his defense? I stand in the presence of God. How can I be sure? You want to know how to be sure? Because I stand in the presence of God. You ever had somebody speak to you that way? Not that they said, I stand in the presence of God, but they carry themselves and they live a life where you know they stand in the presence of God. And so what they have just said to you borrows that authority. It means a lot. That has a multiplying effect within the church, by the way. The more that we are drawn into God as revival begins to take root here, and the people who we are, as we begin to stand in the presence of God and we know Him intimately and we revive our old private prayers and we share those with Him, we grow as persons. We loan that to each other. If I see that you yourself are being transformed because you yourself are doing things with God that aren't in this room, then when I see you and you speak to me, I might say to you, how can I be sure? And you have every right to stay back to me because I stand in the presence of God. That's okay to live that kind of life. There need to be more and more and more of us who are speaking prophetically, not necessarily future telling, truth telling, God language telling. Where do we get God's language? From Him. Now, Gabriel gives us an example, but we have every right to live this way ourselves. What great promise of God, though, is too big for you? If God might come to you and send an angel who's been in His presence, you've got hopes and desires and dreams and things that you want to come true, but if He were to say it to you, that's just too big and you'd have to check. I want to point out something. It's not just that Zechariah comprehends this concept. He has lived his life for this concept. He's not surprised that there will be someone to announce. He's not surprised that the Messiah will come. It's what his entire life is built around. He's a Jewish priest. He knows the prophecy. None of it is new to him, but he doesn't think it will include him. None of this that comes out of the mouth of the scary angel that is spoken to him in power and causes him to tremble, it's not the content that is new to him, it's his inclusion that is new to him. He doesn't think it will involve him. The very thing he has waited for is here, and he can't believe it. Be careful what you wait for. I want to finish 21 to 25. Meanwhile, the people were waiting for Zechariah and wondering why he stayed so long in the temple. When he came out, he could not speak to them. They realized he had seen a vision in the temple, for he kept making signs to them, but he remained unable to speak. When his time of service was completed, he returned home. He had to stay at work, finished his shift. After this, his wife Elizabeth became pregnant, just like the angel Gabriel told him, and for 5 months remained in seclusion. The Lord has done this for me, she said. In these days he has shown his favor in taking away my disgrace among the people. What do we have here? A mute man and a hiding wife. Up to that point, the greatest thing in the world was hidden behind the doors of a muted man and a hiding wife. What does your home feel like? I'm not saying you're hiding, but I am saying you're home. I'm not saying that you're hiding, but I am saying we feel a little bit like this, don't we? When we read here that it says Elizabeth secluded herself for 5 months, that's got a little bit of sting to it. Because there are some new words that have been brought into our language that have a different kind of sting in our minds, like quarantine and exposure. And she was quarantined. She was secluded. But the greatest thing in the world was hidden and muted. What is happening in your seclusion? In your quiet, away and alone, what is going on? God knows this full well. He didn't send either one of them away. But in a quiet, locked house, there was something stirring. And it wasn't just something. It's not just something. It's the greatest thing. God wastes nothing. God wastes nothing. We might have some days where we finish them and think, what was that for? God wastes nothing. He calls everything. He speaks to us in 100 ways. Are we listening? This season that we are in is different, but he won't waste it. He won't waste it. This behind closed doors feeling, this feeling that is not what it used to be. Behind the closed doors was the announcer, was a birth. These are the words that I want to leave us with. You have in your notes, I'm going to just tell you how to fill in the blank. I want you to dwell on them. I'm going to explain them. Oh, come all ye faithful. What does that mean? You. But faithful can become predictable, and predictable can become stagnant. So I'm not saying, oh, come all ye stagnant. Oh, come all ye predictable. Oh, come all ye faithful who are ready to be interrupted. I know you might be behind closed doors, oh faithful, but there's something else behind those doors. What's happening in your seclusion? Oh, come all ye faithful, and let your quiet nativity nurture tomorrow's promised birth. Oh, come all ye faithful, and let your quiet nativity, your quiet occasion of a birth. Now you can view this as quiet waiting, quiet patience, something like a grave. It isn't. There's a big difference between a grave and a womb. Allow your home to be a womb, a place of quiet, careful nurturing of life that will be born. It will be born. You will not be left in this. So come, all ye faithful, and let your quiet nativity nurture tomorrow's birth. So that when we reached the moment of conception, life will break forth. What life is being grown up and born in your home in a pandemic? Allow the quarantine to be a womb. He was mute. She was hidden. They were pregnant. Let us be pregnant. Oh, come all ye faithful.